But let me first introduce the panelists today. So we're very pleased to have with us today, first of all, Luigi Pasquali, who is the CEO of Telespazio. On top of that, we have Scott Mumford, who is the CEO of Liquid Telecom. And finally, we have also Parikh, Senior Director of Microsoft Azure Space. So gentlemen, we'll have about 45 minutes for this session. And as a starting point, I would just like to invite each of the speakers to briefly introduce the company representing, as well highlight its role in the satellite sector. So maybe I think first we'll turn it to Luigi Pasquali to give us a brief introduction, and we'll follow through the other speakers, and afterwards we'll rightly jump into Q&A. So maybe first, Luigi, if you can unmute yourself and give us your introduction.
Thank you, Nathan. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, Telespazio is a service provider. We are a transnational company. We were born in Italy 60 years ago, almost 60 actually, in 2021. We will celebrate our 60th anniversary. Basically, now we are present in 8-9 countries, all around Europe and also in Latin America, and also based on a global approach and business. We are a service provider, I said, mainly in two main segments, which are satellite communications and geoinformations, the use of Earth observation data integrated with others to realize a number of specific applications. Then our business is also based on our capability to operate satellite systems based on our space centers and teleports, maintenance and operating conditions, which is definitely one of our main heritage, and that where today the technology that you were making reference at the introduction are founding very important solutions. But of course, I said that we are almost to be 60, but we are looking ahead. The business in our capability to become always a very reliable service provider for a transforming market is looking to the possibility to enter, as we are doing, in space domain awareness, in in-orbit services, in the use of drones, in GNSS applications. I say GNSS because we're in Europe, but generally speaking, positioning based applications, as well as services for new space operators. So we are a service provider with a long heritage, but also with a high expectations from the future, which appears to be very interesting and brilliant.
Thank you, Luigi, for the introduction, and definitely we'll talk more about these expectations you have for the future. Before we do that, maybe give the word to Scott Mumford. So maybe Scott, same kind of introduction, just introduce the company and highlight its role in the satellite sector. So you can unmute yourself and please start.
Cool, thank you, Nathan. So Liquid Telecom Satellite Services is the satellite and media arm of the Liquid Telecom group of companies. So Liquid Telecom is a pan-African telecommunications company that specializes in voice data and telecommunications services across the African region. So Liquid Telecom as a company started around 2001, actually as a satellite service company originally, that then diversified into terrestrial fiber optics, and today has the largest privately owned fiber optic network in the African continent. The satellite services division, Liquid Telecom Satellite Services, for which I run, is responsible for the teleport, satellite, VSAT, communications sector of that. And we're operating in 20 countries across sub-Saharan Africa at this point in time. As I said, we have numerous teleports, as well as running the media services side of the business, both on broadcast, DTT, terrestrial, and recently CDN and streaming OTT applications as well.
Perfect, thanks for that. Last but not least, Chirag, Parikh. Same kind of question. Obviously, Microsoft, not a lot of introduction required, but maybe specify the role in the satellite sector.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, certainly Microsoft is a globally known corporation. We've historically been known as a productivity software suite provider. And over the past decade, Microsoft has really grown into a global leader as well in the cloud computing environment, particularly our Microsoft Azure platform, where we've been able to bring in our productivity software, the platform, as well as the most important part, the intellectual innovation that our people bring. Over the past year, we have decided that the space mission area is both an area that is an enabler for our end customers' use of the cloud, but also the fact that our cloud can also be an enabler for the space industry as well. So they've brought in myself and several other experts from the space industry to be able to help enable that. And so really what we're trying to do is make the cloud accessible, develop reliable, repeatable technologies to help the space community launch faster and operate more efficiently here. And really how this works is really the core mantra of where we are as a company. We do not intend anytime soon right now to launch any satellites into space. And really what that means is, our success is based upon the partner success of the satellite community. As those launch into space, how can we become a trusted platform in applying our tools, grounding in our philosophy that when our customers succeed, then we succeed. And so really we're looking and leaning into our culture of innovation and investing in the power of the space community, where we'll be able to enable satellite connectivity, unblock the cloud in more scenarios, and really empower our customers and partners to achieve more by enabling them to be able to access global compute where maybe in the past you've not been able to in a SATCOM world.
Perfect. I think that's a great introduction, and definitely we'll discuss more about Azure during this panel. But before I want to go there, and this is kind of part of the Q&A, and I will also welcome everyone, the audience, to submit their questions through the kind of Q&A function of the platform. Obviously, we are meeting virtually, so COVID-19 is naturally the first question. So maybe, Luigi, if I start with you, you can maybe bring us back to the start of the year when COVID-19 unfolds and lockdowns get in place. What kind of impact did it have on business operations for Telespazio?
Yeah, of course, COVID-19 today is the most important topic because we are experiencing something which was really unexpected and very heavily touching all our day life. Actually, COVID-19 has been managed by us, as well as I suppose most of our of the other companies with the same similar business model, by of course two main objectives: contemporary protecting the safety of people, of employees and their families, by the way, but also to grant business continuity. And then this is of course possible by extensively applying smart working in the areas where, or for the activities where remotization is possible. Of course, smart working so heavily organized in a very short time could have impacted our business in terms of efficiency, but at the end, after several months, I can tell you that the results of the risk of inefficiency is very limited. So we are quite satisfied of the capability of our people to work from remote in a way to collaborate and integrate what is necessary to grant continuity. But of course, not everything can be remotized, and then particularly in the space centers, in the teleports, we have people working physically in the center where over 7 days, 24 hours, we need to maintain our operation in place. And then we have applied all the necessary measures to segregate people, to have to reduce risks and increasing resilience. So the experience is that we are managing something very difficult, but at the very end, after several months, I can tell you that our activities has granted the continuity. We have been able to support our customers. we have been able even to answer to specific needs that institutions have in the countries where we operate, have opened because satellite systems may support, in a way, COVID-19. Look, for instance, connectivity, broadband access, or a number of specific applications where we can support we can support the management of the emergency. So at the end, it's a very particular period we are taking, I would say. We are maintaining, keeping our track with of course, some more difficulties, with some markets which are clearly reduced, like for instance, cruising, maritime, or aeronautical communications. You know, it's visible the heavy reduction that that market experiences, but others are keeping on track in even for something, even some moderate growth. I'm thinking to governmental, Milsatcom, things where even in this pandemic period, operations are always necessary, or even more than in the past.
So as kind of a sum up, is the net kind of result, is it positive in terms of additional demand, or is it kind of the negatives balances, it's kind of equal, if you would say, kind of the COVID-19 impact on demand?
I can say that we have for something additional demand, maybe nothing very impacting in a positive sense. So in generally speaking, in satellite communications, we have some reduction for sure. Particularly, I can say less than someone could imagine in front of the disaster that we have around of us. Because we still have areas where satellite communication are essential, and those areas where we are capable to keep and maintaining our operations, our business is keeping also in terms of results.
Maybe as Scott, if a similar kind of question for you actually, you address a number of different kind of segments within the enterprise, within the either tourism or like the enterprise. So could you kind of explain us a little bit how much demand changed? You know, working from home, I think all these kind of MPICs should be kind of quite significant, or is it fairly easy to deal with as a service provider? You have that flexibility, or were there stressful days, let's say back in March, April, when it started to unfold?
I think it's been a stressful time for everybody, Nathan. If I'm honest, I think the global impact of COVID-19 has been huge, and obviously is still ongoing. I would say that we've been very quick to respond in how we facilitate and operate within the changing environment, and we were very lucky, much like Luigi was saying, in terms of having to switch to remote working, in that we had a number of remote run teleports that were controlled via our central teleport, using the monitoring and control systems anyway. So switching to remote working from the main teleport wasn't too much of an issue for us. Obviously, there were a few license increases and so forth in software that had to be done quite quickly to enable that, but we managed that very well. The demand side of things has been quite interesting. So obviously, we've seen certain sectors that have almost been wiped out entirely from a customer base perspective. So one of the main industries that's been affected, certainly across sub-Saharan Africa for us, is the tourism sector. We were providing obviously internet connectivity into a number of safari lodges and the game lodge industry across the region there that dried up almost overnight. So obviously from a cost impact perspective, almost all of those safari lodge operators and owners contacted us around the ability to be able to decrease their costs as much as possible. And we've obviously done everything we can to help them and facilitate that. But interestingly, as well as we saw a big switch to remote working, we also saw a large increase in terms of the number of internet and broadband type services that were required across all of the operating countries that we're in for remote working. So the two have really been sort of counteracted against each other, and overall, I think we've seen an increase in business demand over the last sort of 6 months, 8 months since COVID, really. So we're sort of net up on where we were really expecting to be when this thing first hit in March, April of this year.
Right. So, and if you look then kind of in the, well, it's always difficult, obviously, with the current situation to look far ahead, but do you see there might be a structural change in terms of demand or requirements caused by the COVID-19 that could impact or your business or make some decisions around that for the future?
I think it's fundamentally changed how we all operate, to be honest. And I think all companies, ourselves included, are looking at the high costs of having centralized offices and large centralized offices, to support hundreds and sometimes thousands of employees in one location. So I think we've seen quite a shift in mindset towards working from home, and actually the productivity still there from the employees and the staff that are working from home, and actually they're seeing some benefits of the work-life balance that brings as well. So I think I foresee the demand continuing on the current vein, certainly for the foreseeable future, and obviously with the advent of cloud, and as more and more systems move into cloud environments, obviously that connectivity becomes even more critical, because all of the systems are within the cloud environment. So I think although COVID's obviously had an impact on certain verticals, I think it's also in a sort of paradoxical way been quite good for us as an industry in terms of giving us that quantum shift in terms of how we're all working, and the capabilities that the industry, not just the satellite industry, but the telecom industry as a whole, are able to bring to everybody, to sort of readdress that work-life balance and centralized office approach.
Good, thank you. So Chirag, I believe you joined Microsoft at the start of the year, so when the COVID-19 all started to play out. So in terms of the decision making or any kind of timing around kind of your announcement around Azure Spaces, have COVID had any impact to that? Is it delayed, or maybe again, as Scott pointed out, the cloud component of working together becoming increasingly important. So did the COVID have any kind of influence in the decision making or timing around the Azure space?
I think there's a couple of things. First, I think from the broader Azure cloud perspective, we've definitely seen, as Scott has referenced, a significant uptick in the use of our cloud. When we look at things from, obviously business use to school systems, using this for complete distance education, and of course disaster recovery, and then full out governments basically turning to this to be able to use whether our Office 365 or Teams productivity software. So that from a macroscopic perspective is something that we were very grateful to have as a foundation. So we had that entire infrastructure already working. So as we grew Azure Space, that became not as much of a problem. As a matter of fact, I would argue, as we are developing our partnerships across both the United States and the world, it's actually enabled us to be able to have the ability to quickly go from meeting to meeting to be able to have conversations about opportunities for partnerships. It really hasn't slowed us down any, because what we're really doing is connecting those capabilities that already exist there. And a lot of that, as Scott had referenced, can be done virtually and through the cloud. And really, the only challenge that we might have had is, of course, the personal nature of having in-person conversations, with partners of ours. Of course, that's one. Secondly, as we talk with governments around the world and even here in the United States, we of course have to oblige by their policies. So sometimes having those detailed requirements-driven conversations to understand their needs and apply our tools towards that can be it's more meetings more than anything, but we've gotten there. And then, the in-person piece, that's where it has been, I would say, just slightly slower, as we will talk about, I'm sure, later, but as we developed our modular data center, that does require people to be on site. It requires both ourselves and our SATCOM partners to be, putting on the hardware, doing the testing, to be able to conduct these types of demonstrations. But in truth, the way that we did it, we did it with all appropriate protocols, with our initial test up in Washington State, which was hit initially pretty hard. So we have had to take those issues into account. But all in all, we expected that we would be where we are this calendar year. And so now, what we're looking at is, now that we've done these first few steps, how are we able to scale this to be able to provide a broader platform for more partners?
Good. Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about Azure and the data centers, the modular data centers, a bit more later on. Before we go there, I think the topic of the session is kind of building this next gen satellite experience, and obviously there's been a lot of new technologies currently being invested in the satellite sector. So my question would be, if you would have to pick the single most disruptive technology in your view for the satellite industry, what would it be? And just briefly, kind of the rationale for that. So maybe first Luigi, and then I will ask the others to do the same.
Thank you, Nathan. I think, of course, I'm excluding for a while what is already, let's say, on our path daily, like artificial intelligence and so on, because I think that we cannot consider them as next gen technologies. We are already there, but maybe the one that most represents the need, at least in the field that we follow, is the quantum technology. Quantum technology, I see it very important because of course, together with the quantum key distribution, because this is basically the time when this technology can become more, let's say, visible in the systems for the maturity of the technology itself, but also because security in general becomes more and more essential in all the systems, even of course mainly in the institutional field, but not only. And then quantum technology is also, we have also the expectations about the capability that it may be expressed through these technologies, because it will be in a way transparent to the customers, because customers maybe can feel the benefit of having a system based on something that may increase and strengthen security, even if that don't change significantly or apparently the performance. And then I see we are measuring the sensitiveness and expectations around this technology, even because, for instance, here in Europe, we are, that we are conceiving the GovSatcom systems even at the regional level, and both the European Commission and the European Space Agency are working to consider for the GovSatcom systems quantum.
All right, so that's an area for the company as well, where you see you could invest kind of the R&D and parts of it, or it's more with partnerships that you expect to work around with the quantum technology, or is it something you would internally develop as well?
Both. I mean, we have, of course, launched a plan on R&D, specifically funded, self-funded to support these developments, but this is a clear field where open innovation applies, and then we are collaborating with universities, but also with other partners in a way to be able to bring up a reliable solutions in short time.
Good. Scott, maybe a similar question for you. What do you consider as a kind of the most disruptive technology that really can impact, you believe, the kind of the experience of your users, right, of your clients? If you were to pinpoint to one, what would it be?
Yeah, look, I agree with Luigi. I think certainly quantum computing and the developments around that are gonna have huge impacts for the whole of the telecommunication industry as a whole. But I think we're still quite a way away from that becoming mainstream. I think for the next sort of jump really is going to be the move towards everything being cloud-based and a lot of the decision making and processing being on board the spacecrafts, and even the inter-satellite links that will reduce the overall latency and improve the user experience, on an availability or global availability. So I think in terms of the next sort of 2 to 3 years, in terms of what I see being the biggest disruptor in terms of the technology available, I think it's really that move to onboard spacecraft processing and the inter-satellite communication links, because I think that moves the goalposts away from where the terrestrial fiber is built. Obviously fiber and the speeds that it's capable of delivering now, and the development that we're seeing in terms of the terabits per second being able to be passed over these links, it moves that down the chain one, so that the high speed capabilities are available to all anywhere globally without that need of a physical piece of glass running into the building. And I think as we move towards the processing being on board the spacecraft as well, in terms of routing capability or that latency and the overall user experience in terms of how they access their services, because ultimately everything's going to be in the cloud and application based. It just improves tenfold. So I think really for me that's, in the short to medium term, that's really the biggest disruptor I see in terms of how and what's going to impact the user experience.
Good, that's understood. Chirag, same question for you. If you have to point to kind of the biggest disruption you foresee.
Yeah, well, first I want to thank both Luigi and Scott for taking my 2 answers that I had already thought of. So I appreciate we were very much in lockstep in mind on that. So yeah, I mean, particularly, when you think about, I love Luigi's answer about AI, because, at what point is AI now the present as opposed to the future? And I think quantum is very soon as well here. There's a great quote that, we use often, which is, the future is here. It's unevenly distributed. And I think that's kind of where Scott is going as well, which is, as we develop and apply these unique types of technologies that are cloud enabled, how are we able to first enable them, in a localized setting? How are we then able to do them regionally? And then ultimately, of course, our perspective is global. But then, global goes beyond just the terrestrial element here. Of course, it goes into space. And so, we're no longer just a productivity suite company. And we don't want to just be a place where you can have data stored. Our mantra here is no longer just, hey, just store the data here and do with what you want. When we develop a partner system here, it's really being able to say, what can we do with your data and where can we do that with? So to Scott's point, one of the areas that we see a lot of promise for the future of technology is truly about on the edge, and the edge can be literally in space. And so if you have platforms, containers, and services that can be applied on a satellite, that not only can provide you instantaneous decision making, but from a satellite designer perspective, you don't need to develop the storage and the compute and the horsepower of a satellite to do all that processing and bring all that data down, and you can provide smaller bits of information. That actually has truly transformational technology into the satellite design element as well. So think about smaller satellites, think about these more distributed satellites along the way there. And so taking that AI ML that was once on the ground up into orbit is truly an experience. But again, foundationally, we need to make sure that we have that connectivity around the world. So no matter where you are on the Earth, you have the ability to have access to information through both our fiber network as well as SATCOM connectivity. But then you also have the ability to provide those types of end user compute and machine learning services that traditionally have not been capable. And, a couple examples, of course, there's hundreds of government examples you can use, from humanitarian relief to military missions. But when you think about it from the industry case, you think about mining operations, you think about oil operations on platforms in the ocean and in the Gulfs and such. What could you do if you actually had the ability to compute, either have that compute on the edge, or bringing it from the satellite, the solution straight to the edge element there? So I really do resonate with what both Luigi and Scott said.
Good. And actually, there's a good segue in some of the audience questions that I just received. So Chirag, for the Azure space, what would be kind of the primary first adopters, basically, of those? You mentioned oil and gas, government. Is that really the type of clients that you feel are the first adopters of those Azure space solutions?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There's a lot of use cases, of course, and, as we're developing our, edge devices, which range from the one that we just released a couple of weeks ago, the size of a Connex container, to something much smaller here. There are a lot of government applications here. But generically, edge will require network services for customers located at globally distributed remote locations. And so that's why we still need to have that deep partnership with the SATCOM community. And so when you think about like our modular data center here, it's a really big edge appliance here. And so when you think about it from early commercial adopters, yes, I think oil, gas, mining, organizations that need, that don't have truly the benefit of any modern technology, when you think about SATCOM connectivity, when you think about the compute and the AI. And so those are easy early adopters that we see, whether you're talking about our larger edge devices or smaller ones. But then truly, as you move into the government realm of things here, of course, defense and intelligence enterprises would certainly have that, because often they are operating locations that do not provide either any form of connectivity and compute, or if they do have connectivity and compute, something that Luigi said earlier, is you don't have the ability to have trusted operations sometimes, and you need to have that type of data security. And so that's where we really see the opportunity for that. And then finally, I would even say, when you think about humanitarian and disaster relief efforts as well, where you may have, local power, compute, connectivity grids that have been decimated, and being able to provide instantaneous capacity there through both SATCOM connectivity as well as our edge compute, I think has some true unique value that has hereunto not been seen before.
Yeah, and I want to address one audience question. So could you provide an order of magnitude of the future revenues expected on Azure Space? Is something...
that's probably something that I probably wouldn't be able to talk about in a public environment, but we do think.
But again, so you work with your partners, maybe a slightly different question, right? So is it basically that it's kind of joint go-to-market, that you would go to your clients and then say, okay, in areas where they maybe have poor connectivity, or no connectivity, you can apply, it's an integrated solution that you offer, and SCS will go the other way to offer that. Is that the way how we need to think about it, about the go-to-market?
Yeah, Nathan, thank you for answering my question already, but just double click on that. I mean, that's exactly our goal here is, Microsoft's Microsoft. We have a globally distributed enterprise. We are, in every major country in the world, and we have the ability to understand the user needs, from their productivity end to their mission solution needs, and to be able to the opportunity to bring in our mission partners, our satellite partners, into that ecosystem, right? By understanding their needs is a win-win situation for both of us. So really, the go-to-market is there, but then similarly, our satellite partners who are recognizing the value and unique element that the cloud provides us, then allows them to take us as a cloud provider to their end solution customers as well. So it's truly a win-win solution on both ends there.
Good. So maybe first, Luigi and Scott, I would like to have your views, and we'll start with Luigi, on how do you see the impact of Microsoft Azure or the kind of the modern data centers on the kind of satellite industry? What kind of impacts you expect to see from for your clients potentially on these kind of type of solutions?
Well, the impact I'm expecting is significant. I mean, you have maybe used yourself, Nathan and Chirag, but also Scott before. I mean, the concept of integration. So then this is maybe the key word. Integration for a satellite service provider. I mean, we are, as I said, following a large market with different needs, and then satellite is going to be more and more integrated into terrestrial solutions first. Let's say having hybrid solutions as the result of that. But more than this, there is an integration inside the satellite technologies, which is growing significantly, giving to the market particularly benefits. I'm referring to the possibility to integrate geoinformation, connectivity, location analytics, and all the other, let's say, elements of the satellite system. So these levels of integration, together with solutions cloud-based, like the one that Azure is already presenting to the market, is for sure. I'm expecting that will give an outstanding pulse to the market, to our capability to meet users' requirements. In a way, for instance, we are making an important experience with the geoinformation, having built up a way to interact with our market based on cloud, based on exactly the system that Azure is proposing to the market, together with them and with the other partners. And then we are experiencing a huge reaction on our market. So then I'm expecting that it will be a sort of breakthrough.
Scott, same question for you. Do you see a role for Liquid Telecom as well to play with these kind of solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I've said a couple of times already, we're seeing such huge movement towards cloud-based solutions and cloud-based services as a whole. And the investment that's going into data centers at the moment globally is quite astronomical, to forgive the pun. But I think having these modular, almost drop and deploy data center capabilities, both in terms of private and public cloud architectures that can be, deployed very quickly, either into, humanitarian disaster areas or, even the oil and gas and mining and exploration services and so forth, is going to have a huge impact for the ability and service capabilities that us as a service provider and an enterprise service provider can have there. And I think, obviously, as I said, with what's going on in the data center world, we're going to see, a number of the hyperscale environments where the main node and cloud infrastructure sits. But like all things, that's going to be distributed from an architecture perspective, and not everywhere needs to have that level of hyperscale infrastructure sat there. So having the modular ability to be able to deploy, a custom built, ready to go off the shelf data center environment into, a specific economical or humanitarian scenario quickly will be game changing for all of us.
And maybe one other question, because you've seen the announcements where they've partnerships with SpaceX, Starlink, and O3b mPOWER. So how important is the latency really for cloud-based solutions? Do you think it's a critical component here? I mean, you've been dealing with latency, Scott, for example, with latency for a long time and supporting these kind of type of applications. So would it take out a headache, or what is the impact, you think?
I think it's very application specific, Nathan. If I'm honest with you, if you look at the big picture, and if you look at the say the Office 365 environment where you're predominantly looking at the Office applications and the email and the Teams environment, that latency issue's gone away. Microsoft have done a fantastic job of making that software very resilient and running over. Maybe not necessarily the best of networks. So, over a really solid, high availability satellite network, it's seamless. You really can't tell the difference between running it over a satellite environment or a terrestrial environment. But that being said, other more mission critical or time sensitive applications, latency's always been an issue. If we look at the stock markets, for example, they pay huge amounts of money to have the absolute minimum amount of latency that they can get away with. So, like all things in life, it's application and application specific. And although I think it will become less of an issue, I think there will always be instances where it's important. But obviously, we can't get latency down to zero. So. It's always, when you're in the sort of tens of milliseconds, really, it becomes irrelevant to a large degree anyway.
All right, good. Unfortunately, guys, their time is up, so I have to close the panel for today. And I appreciate all your inputs presented today. Happy to continue the discussion somewhere over the year, and I wish you all the best. So thank you all for joining today, and see you next time.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.